before you for approval is 2 provisioning center licenses, which are the dispensaries. 1 per class for grow facilities. There are 3 classes. 1 secure transporter license, 1 safety compliance facility license, and 2 processor facilities. And that's the grow marijuana and then process it into this. Now, sure.
So that's changed a little bit. We've lowered that.
That's changed slightly. Yes, gone down.
You know, just based on some of the feedback we received, we felt like starting a little smaller, and if the council was more comfortable at a later date, you could increase it or you could change it now. Just again, we were responding to feedback.
Because with the meeting that we had and talking to the former mayor of Lansing, it seemed like they went overboard, and they're cutting back, but still, they have quite a few more facilities than this. This is 3 for a city this size. I didn't know if that would be appropriate.
I don't know that I think if you asked everybody in this room, that answer would likely vary.
Yeah.
So, we just felt that being conservative was probably the right path, but it's ultimately up to you guys.
What did you say about 3?
There's only going to be 3.
Oh, I thought you said.
Oh, grow, 3 grow facilities, but 2 dispensaries.
Right.
And really just.
And 2 processors.
And 2 processors. And just so the council, just to remind the council as well, when we were talking at the town hall meeting, in my experience in dealing with this in other communities, the dispensaries are really the ones that are visible to the community. The grow facilities, the processors, the safety compliance, the secure transporters, these are not retail shops. So the way the ordinance is set up with regard to signage and buildings, if you are a grow facility or a processor, it's going to be a building that's going to have some name on it, and that's it. So the dispensaries, and like they were talking in Lansing, I think they had like 30 dispensaries. That's what it looks like, a lot, and then having so many things.
I think they were talking they had like 40 grow.
Yeah, and that as well, right.
I think that's why I thought that we'd have more grow than we do dispensaries, because nobody sees them.
So I have a question about it.
Yes.
So one company could technically get a permit for all 3 areas, is that correct?
Yeah, they can have stacking.
They can stack it, because I thought I read in here that no individual can be associated with another one.
It depends on, I think, the type of facility, and there are some, even at the state level, some, like you can't be a grower and a safety compliance facility that certify your own product.
Right.
Yeah.
Do your own report card.
Yeah, inspect your own stuff. So there's that.
Each of the categories, so the same guy can have a license in every category.
Right.
So the stacking,
Councilman Raymond, do you have something?
Yeah, as far as any of these, especially the grow locations, is there any information on what's going to happen to all that wastewater that comes out of there?
The requirement of the ordinance is that they make sure they dispose of all waste in a sanitary manner that does not expose any of the
My concern
residents.
is that water coming out of there, unless they trap it,
Mhm.
you would never really know what happened to it.
To the chair, in a commercial building, they are required for pre-treatment on a lot of it before it goes out to the sewage facilities. It gets tested.
What, coming out of these plants, are we gonna test it?
We do already on a lot of them.
So you'll be testing a marijuana plant?
If it's a commercial building, it would qualify. I'm not going to test it.
Who tests it?
The county tests it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we'll make sure that the county does a job.
Well, they're doing it now. I get notifications all the time from them that people haven't passed the limits. We have limits that are allowed to go down into the sewage system that are actually in our ordinance that we adopted the Wayne County sewage ordinance.
Right.
And those limits are listed in there. And before they can even open, they have to go get a permit for discharge from the county. And then, based on what they have, the county will know what limits they may exceed.
Unrelated to this, Mr. Chairman, we will have an item before you guys in the near future where a company's requesting to increase those limits. It's nothing to do with any of this, but, so we'll talk about that and how that process actually works in the near future.
And I don't know what the waste would be, what would be in that waste, but if it's a certain amount, it's got to be pre-treated. but then it's gonna get treated again at the plant down there that we know.
Oh, yeah, that we own.
So it'll be, it'll essentially be treated twice in some cases.
Okay, and then the final thing I'd like to point out is on page 22, section 1115, the location, which is the same proposed locations of I-1 and I-2. But in response to some issues or questions that were raised over the last week, as I indicated previously, this is the medical marijuana kind of enabling license ordinance. With regard to zoning, although we put it in here for discussion, there is going to need to be an amendment of the zoning code, which is something that gets generated through the planning commission. So once this council, if it approves and decides that it does want medical marijuana facilities in its community, then the actual zoning change will have to go through the planning commission. All right, with regard to these things, I mean, because of the nature of medical marijuana, we've been generating and talking about this as a policy level with the council. And so that's why it is here. But it will have to be amended, because there are certain things you have to send out notice 15 days before, and it has to go through the planning commission, which then comes up to the city council to approve the actual zoning code change. Because this will have to be added as a use under the zoning code. So just a little...
So if it passes here and it fails there, then it's...
Well, if it fails there, I still believe the city council decides what to do ultimately, because it's a recommended approval or denial.
Oh, okay.
You know, it just has to go through the process under the Zoning Enabling Act of deliberation through the Planning Commission, and then it ends up in front of the council to either go forward with the recommendation or the lack of recommendation.
So this is, for all the facilities that we would approve with this, would only be in I-1 and I-2?
That's the way this is reading, correct.
Okay. Because I know I've seen dispensaries in just regular.
Like plazas down there.
Regular plazas.
Yeah, and regular retail stores.
Yeah, and to me, I don't see a big issue with that. You know, it's out in open there. I mean, with the I-1 and I-2, with the grow facilities, it shouldn't matter if it's I-1, I-2, or M1 or M2, because they're not, you don't have nothing on it. There's no big neon sign with a marijuana leaf. Nobody knows it's there.
Right.
As long as they're going through, you know, all the limits here, 1,000 feet from the nearest this and that. You know, so,
That's something for the council to...
The thing that has to be changed on the zoning board would be to add the wording for the marijuana facilities.
Add the facilities
To
as
those
a
areas.
permitted use under those areas, because
That's what's changing,
Yeah,
not the numbers, just.
correct, well, correct, because the zoning code for R1, R2, I1, I2, M2 has listed what's permissible and those things. So it would be adding them as a permitted use.
Okay.
Councilman Missouri, do you have something?
Is this on an agenda item for planning, or are they waiting for council, or do they even know that this is in process, or
I know
what's the
Lo-
status with the commission?
I know Laura knows.
What's that?
I know that Laura knows, and she and I have talked about it as something that needs to be brought before them. Whether or not she's presented it to them as something that's upcoming, I do not know.
I'm just thinking about what Tim said, it seems a little cart before the horse if we're gonna approve this without having their authority on the table, so.
I think the thinking was originally, Councilperson,
Yeah, that's just
this
the
was a
first
big,
reading, though.
that this was a big policy issue for the council to address in general first. But,
It's
yeah,
just
I
the
mean,
first reading, we're not actually approving.
Right, so this is the first reading, and then
Right.
once they goes to zoning, the recommendation comes up to us, and then we can act accordingly.
No, I just don't know how many times we approve something here, whether it be a first or a second reading before it's gone through planning, if planning requires it to be approved.
Planning does not, though, it's just a recommendation from planning.
Right.
It's not, ultimately, the planning would say, we recommend denial, or we recommend
Well, I know,
approval.
but I'm saying, how often do we approve something before we seek that recommendation?
always-
Maybe it happens all the time, I don't know, it seems a little premature to me, but.
through the chair, Councilman, it's not common. Answer to the question.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
If I may go back to the Councilman Johnson's comment, I think the I-2, Dave, if I'm not mistaken, the I-2 is a requirement for the grow based on the state requirement, correct?
Yes, for the grows, that is the only place in the state statute that provides that they must be in a industrial type of facility.
Yeah.
The others are the grows. The other does not have anything specific in the state law.
And then in terms of the dispensary, again, ultimately, that's the pleasure of this body, wherever you guys want to put it. We benchmarked against other communities, and it seemed that the common theme was the I-1. There are communities like Warren, for example, that they made a decision to, I don't know if it's O1 or B1, general business, and they made the argument that if a CVS can be there and distribute prescription medications, why can't a dispensary? I'm not sure what the correct argument is. We were more comfortable bringing this forward because we felt it was more conservative, but if you guys ultimately don't like it, it's certainly subject to change.
Well, and this is the first time we're doing it, so it's kind of live and learn type of situation, so go for it, see how it works. If we have to change it, we'll change it.
And that's one of the reasons I think that, starting out with a lower amount of facilities, at this council, and generally, if we see good outcomes from this and see that there's a need for more facilities, then council can act accordingly in the future. So that was kind of, why I thought the numbers were good as well. Councilman Raymond, did you have something?
Yes, it did. In reference to section E on page 12, it says the mayor shall solemnly make the determination to whether a license will be issued to the applicant. I mean, to me, that, again, this is not a contract. And this is something that I think, even for the mayor, I'm not saying, it's in here, but I think the council should have a little bit of say-so on this, because you're going to have applicants, and if you have one person making a determination on that applicant, I think that it's kind of, in other words, it could be a little shaky. With 7 people making that decision, you've got a council making that decision, but so be it. That's just what this council wants. If they don't want to be part of the contract, I can understand, but this is not a contract.
Mr. Chairman, this is Nora. I don't know what page it's on, Dave. Do you know?
It's on
what-
page 12.
Page 12.
No.
E.
Under, I'm sorry, 12?
It's
Under
the same
E.
spot.
E.
The committee and the approvals on the same.
Yeah, there is a committee that it would have to go in front of. We've identified who the committee makeup is. So, they would have to get the state approval, then it would have to go before the committee before it ultimately made it to that point.
But you would still have the right to make a final decision, correct?
Well, it's just a execution of the document.